Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot and a member of PMDG's 777 beta team. Welcome to the FMC Preflight tutorial for the PMDG Boeing 777. Before we start, a little self-advertisement over here. I'm currently writing an ebook for the Boeing 777 in which I will guide you through all the procedures in a written and structured way, and in which I can chime in a couple of additional details that would just not be feasible on the YouTube tutorial. If you're interested, check out the video description below, and now let's get right into the tutorial. So we've already finished our preliminary pre-flight procedure and we can now start with our FMC setup. There's a little click spot over here that you can use to bring your electronic flight bag right to the front so that you can do an easy FMC setup and at the same time have your universal flight tablet right in front of yourself. So let's get started. We start by going to the electronic flight bag app and importing our flight from SimBrief. This step is important because otherwise you will not be able to load up the uplinks in your FMC. Now our operational flight plan is located right over here in the second tab, and this contains all the information we need. Now, before we get started with the FMC, we need to decide how much fuel to take, and that is luckily a rather easy decision today because we've got very good weather conditions forecast at our destination airport. But let's have a quick look for ourselves so that you can follow up on the decision making. So, destination London Heathrow, wind Cavac, wind almost calm, and the same for our alternate London Gatwick Airport. And that basically makes the fuel decision very easy. So we are going to take the required minimum plus a little bit extra to cover for an extended taxi time because of all the explanations in the tutorials. So if we look at the block fuel value in here, we can see that 52 tons is required. We're going to make that 54 just so that we have a little bit of extra for all the explanations I will do en route. Now with the fuel decided, let's go into the FMC setup. So we start on the menu page and by going to FMC. This brings us to the ident page where we're going to check that the aircraft model is correct, which is 777-300.2 for the 300ER, and that the correct engine is fitted over here, which is the GE90-115BL. We'll also make sure that we've got the correct IRAC in here, and since I'm recording a pre-release beta version of the aircraft to film this, we have a slightly outdated IRAC in here, which is confirmed through the scratchpad message as well. A quick note on scratchpad messages over here: those are advisory messages that the FMC gives you for any condition that should come to your attention, but they are not important as in any system failure that might need pilot action afterwards. Those would all be listed on the ICAS like up here, which by the way also advises you that there is a scratchpad message available in your CDU. Now, going back down in here, scratchpad messages cannot be recalled, so we look at them, we understand them, and then we clear them away, but be aware that once you press clear, you're not able to bring them back up. So that one's done. The next one, enter inertial position, is because our ADRU has finished the alignment process already and is just waiting for the position entry, and that's understood, and we can clear that as well. For the next step, we go on to the position init page, and over here we can do the position initialization for the ADRU alignment. Now, normally the GPS position is used only when the GPS position is not available or not reliable. You could enter your departure airport and the departure airport gate up here. Since the GPS is reliable today, we can simply copy it and then paste it into the inertial position, and you can see that this has completed our ADRU alignment. Now when that is done, we go to the next page, which is the route page. Over here you can either enter your flight plan manually or call one up through the company route, but the normal way to do this is that you're going to go onto route request, and in here we can request our latest SimBrief route that we have imported in the universal flight tablet. So we're going to select the SimBrief route, and on the menu down here we can also set our payload according to SimBrief and set our fuel according to SimBrief. Next we're going to select the route, and this is going to start the uplink request process. So the route request is in progress right now, and while that is in progress we can go ahead and manually set the amount of fuel that we wanted, because the SimBrief uplink sets the exact minimum required from SimBrief. But as we decided that we wanted to take a little bit more, we can take 54 tons and insert that one down here. Alright, the route uplink is now available, as was indicated by the little ding-dong, and if we just take the universal flight tablet away, you can see that we've got that little FMC tag over here now, which advises us that the ding-dong we received actually refers to something being available in the FMC, and not, for example, an ATC message through CPDLC or an ACAS message. So now we can click route load, and this is going to insert the route in our FMC. Let's bring the universal flight tablet back so that we can monitor the progress. The insertion is complete when you see the route data pages on the top over here skip from 1/2 to 1/ however many are required for the route data uplink. So it's still in progress right now, and when it finishes we will see this go up. In the meantime, we can go ahead and check the entries that have been made on the Route 1 page. So in here we've got New York JFK to London Heathrow, but if you look at the flight number, you can see that this is actually slightly wrong in there. So if you look at the flight number up here in the flight plan, we can see that it should be Speedbird 11 Juliet, but it inserted something different. Now, it's important that we check this and that we adjust the flight number to match our ATC call sign. If we don't do that, we are not going to see the, or when we don't do that, air traffic control is not going to see our ACAS and CPDLC messages later on. So we can insert it manually. Speedbird 11 Juliet goes into here. Okay, and just at the same time it looks like the uplink has finished, so it's now route 1 out of 5. And with the route uplinked, we got a couple more scratchpad messages that we can take note of. So descent forecast uplink ready, we'll insert that later on. Wind data uplink ready, we'll insert that later on. Performance init uplink ready, we'll insert that later on. So now we're going to press activate and execute to insert and activate the route. Next up, we are going to enter our departure and destination runway. So we go to departure arrivals. We select our departure runway, which today is going to be runway 31 left. So among the departure page, we hit next page until we see 31 left. Here it is. And we are going to fly the JFK 5 departure today with the famous Canarsie climb. Alright, now that this has been inserted, click execute, and then we can hit departure arrivals again, and we are going to select our arrivals into London Heathrow, which is going to be an ILS approach onto runway 9 left, as we can see on the route in the universal flight tablet. So ILS 9 left, we've got the Zurich 1 hotel arrival, which we can select on the left side on the stars, Zurich 1 hotel, and now we need to know which transition we can take, and there's two ways for us to find out. You can either check it in the operational flight plan, but not all company formats actually have that information available. So this one does. This is the default SimBrief layout, which they classify as Lido layout. And you can see if we scroll all the way down, we can see that this ends at Ockham VOR. So from here we could fly the standard approach, and we can select this down here in the transitions. Next page, Ockham. There is another way how to find this out, though. So I'm just going to erase this entry again, and we will make it again. So we know that we'll do the ILS 1 left. We know that we are going to take the Zurich 1 hotel arrival. But in order to find out the transition, you can have a look at your colleague's FMC. So go to FMC, Lex, and then previous page until you reach the end of the star. So we have that over here in front of the route discontinuity. And over here you can see that Ockham is the last VOR, or the last waypoint, part of the route. So like that you can also find out, and then select the transition as needed. When we are done selecting the transition, we are once again going to execute this. We are going to continue our setup on the route page, where we're going to press route copy, which copies the active route into the second route. So the 777 FMC has two route facilities, similar to an Airbus, which has a primary and a secondary flight plan. And we want to have a backup copy of our route in the second route as well, just in case we mess up editing the first route. Then you can just activate the second, and you've got an original copy of the flight plan back. So we are going to continue this one on the Lex page now, and in here we need to first of all verify all the waypoints in our SID. So how do we do this? Well, let's go to the Navigraph charts, select the departure airport, we're going to go for a SID, and we take the Kennedy 5 departure, which we can pin using that little option up here. Now, if we have a look into the SID, then we can see that on runway 31, it's going to be a left-hand turn over here, and looking at the text over here, Kanasi climb, climbing left turn, direct Charlie Romeo India VOR, make a turn east of radial 039 to remain within 4.5 DME JFK, and then proceed via radial 176, cross 2 DME at or above 2,500 feet. So you can see that in our FMS we climb straight ahead to 400 feet, and then it's got the direct to Charlie Romeo India VOR. But there's a little mismatch there. So if we look at our route, they want us to continue on radial 176 outbound from the VOR afterwards. Now, technically speaking, this is flown in heading mode, but you can kind of help yourself a little bit. So we can insert this type of the departure over here by going onto the legs page. We'll copy Charlie Romeo India VOR, and then we know it's going to be a 176 outbound. So we can take Charlie Romeo India 176, and since it is for an undefined length, we can simply go ahead and insert something like 25 miles. So /25. The format that we're entering right now is place, bearing, distance, and it's without a slash between the place and the bearing, and then a slash separates the bearing from the distance. So if we insert it like this, you can see that we've now drawn this part of the route, and we will be able to fly this in LNAV mode and don't have to use heading select mode, which would only complicate the departure. And now we can execute this change to the route, and now we know that our FMC is prepared to fly the route as per the SID. There is another point on the 777 FMC that is really important to be aware of. Contrary to the Boeing 737, the 777 is not capable of holding a speed restriction without an associated altitude restriction. This means, if we say, for example, we want a speed restriction of 220 knots at this waypoint over here, then we cannot just enter that speed restriction. So look at this. If I try to enter that like I would in the 737, you get an invalid entry message. Instead, what you have to do is you have to insert an altitude restriction with it. So for example, we have the first waypoint above 420 feet, so we could say 220 knot /0420 above, so that we don't get limited from this. And now if we insert this, you can see you're able to insert the speed restriction as well. I'm going to erase this one again. This was just a demonstration. But why is this so important? It is so important because this means that any speed restriction that is part of the standard instrument departure that does not have an associated altitude restriction with it is going to be missing from your legs page. So if there was a published speed restriction on the SID that does not have an altitude restriction with it, it is going to miss in the legs page. You will have to enter it manually. So make a close comparison between your chart and your legs page in order to ensure that the SID is really correct and that all speed restrictions are in there. Another difference between the 777 and the 737 is that the 777 does not know above and below type speed restrictions. So in the 737, for example, you could enter 220 below as a speed. In the 777 that does not work. So the 777 only takes full speed restrictions, and they are always counted as at or below restrictions. So 220 would give you 220 knots or less per the FMC. It is not possible to enter a 220 knots or greater restriction. The 777 does not know about these types. And that is accurate as per the real aircraft. Now that we have checked that all our entries for our SID are correct, we can continue on the route data page down here, where we are going to load the current wind data. And this takes a little while, and then you will see the wind prompt coming up at all the waypoints, and we can execute this. Once the wind is entered, we proceed via the FMC com page down to the descent forecast page, where we're going to enter our descent links. On the FMC com page, you can see these uplink messages here, indicating that there is an uplink available that has not been entered by the pilot yet. So let's click on the uplink over here, and you can see this brings us right to the descent forecast page where we can load the uplink as needed. It is very important that you load all uplinks available, otherwise you will not be able to request new ones. So if you forget to uplink the descent forecast winds, then you cannot uplink the new route link wind that you might request en route. So always make sure that everything gets uplinked that you really need. Now that we've entered the descent forecast uplink, we can continue to the progress page where we're going to compare the distance of the route that we see down here with the distance of the route that we have on our flight plan. So in case of this layout, we can find it down here, ground distance 3073 miles, and we can see we got 3078 miles down here. A small difference like that is acceptable, but if there was a difference of a couple hundred miles or even 1,000 miles, that would be a good indicator that something went wrong during your FMC setup. In order to finish our route uplink, we will have to go back to the route page and then hit next page where we are going to compare our route that's been uplinked with the route that we have on our flight plan. So let's find the route on our plan. We can see that we have it down here, and let's have a look. So we've got runway 31 left as our departure runway. We can see that up here on the page number 1. Then we press next page, and we see our first waypoint is Batty, and we've got Batty down here. Then we fly direct Alpha Charlie Kilo, and in here we have direct Alpha Charlie Kilo. Next page, direct Tusky, and we've got direct Tusky. Then we fly via November 351 Bravo towards Budar, and we have November 315 Bravo to Budar. From there we're going to enter the Nut Track Whiskey towards Rylet, and we'll talk about the Nut Track Whiskey in a few moments. So let's just go forward towards Rylet over here. After Rylet we fly direct Evrin, direct Infec, direct Jetsy, direct Amphil, and we can check Evrin, Infec, Jetsy, Amphil. Then we've got Oxid over here, and then Papa 2 Cyric, which we have in here as well, and then we have our arrival. So that confirms that our route actually matches what we have in here. Next up we need to check our North Atlantic route, and this one can be done right from the page here as well. So let's go ahead and find the track message in our flight plan. So the North Atlantic track message is where the daily tracks are published. And we can see that we start out at Budar, and the track starting at Budar is Nut Track Whiskey down here. Now if we have a look into those waypoints, we need to confirm the exact coordinates are accurate. So we start at Budar, and thereafter we got H5050. Now that format is a little bit cryptic. There are two types of waypoints available on the North Atlantic. You've got full coordinates, like when you look for example at the track message over here for track Victor, you can see Allery 51 degrees north, 50 degrees west. And then on our track we've got half coordinates, so 50.30 north, 50 west. Full coordinates, like the one up here, 5150 north, would be marked as 5150N in the database. Half coordinates are marked as H5050, so that denotes you've got 50 and a half, that's the H, and then 50 degrees west. Nonetheless, we need to ensure that all the coordinates in our database actually match what is required for our flight. So a database is a man-made piece of software, and therefore it might be incorrect. And now you might say, but the database is electronically created. That's true, but still a person created that algorithm. So what we do is we go onto either the route page or the legs page. We copy the waypoint out from here, and then we go into initRef, index, nav data, and then we paste the waypoint into here. And here we can check the exact coordinate of the waypoint. So we've got 50 degrees 30 north, 50 degrees west. We continue to do this for all the waypoints from our North Atlantic track. So next one is 5140, initRef, index, nav data, insert it over here, compare it with the track message. So 5130, 40, we've got 5130 and 40. And then again we do this for the waypoint at 30 west, which is 5230 in here. And finally we've got our 20 degrees west, which we check the same way in here. And again, the coordinate is correct. From there we see it via Tobor to Rylet, and if we have a look at this, then we've got Tobor, Rylet, and thereafter we are in the domestic environment again that we have previously checked. It is very important that you actually compare those coordinates and ensure that they are showing correctly. Once we're done with this check, we can continue on the navrat page. So now we're done inserting our route. Next we are going to tune our radio. So go down to navrat, have a look at the SID chart once again, and we can see that we are supposed to proceed outbound on the radial 176 from Kana CVOR. So we could enter that. So we've got Charlie, Romeo, India, put that in here, and then the course 176 can go down here. Now, the 777 is certified to fly these things as ANAV overlays, so you don't need to manually tune any VORs. However, it is still considered good practice to do this manually so that you have a conventional backup in case all the automation fails. Now, a couple of things that are worth mentioning on the navrat page is that you've got 3 different types of entries here. You can see we've done a manual entry denoted by the M for Kana CVOR. Then we've got JFK VOR, which is automatically tuned, and as soon as we're in the air, it's going to change its tuning to Kana CVOR, which is then going to be denoted by a P, indicating it's part of a procedure of the flight plan. So these are the 3 different types of radio tunings that the 777 FMC is capable of. When we're done with the navrat page, we can go on to the fix page, and in here we can enter anything we deem useful for our flight. Now, today we are meant not to overshoot the radial 039 from Kana CVOR. So what we can do is we enter CRI over here on the fix info page, and then we can enter that radial. So if we take 039 and insert it on the bearing tab, then you can see that it now draws that radial for us that we're not supposed to overshoot. Now, we can see a tiny overshoot over here. That's because the 420 feet point is located or is calculated based off the runway end. Don't worry, we're going to read that much earlier, and then we'll be able to stay within that arc over here. Now, finally, we also have this little note number 2 down here, and if we take a look at this SID again, then we need to cross 2DME Charlie Romeo India or JFK radial 253 at or above 2,500 feet. Now, that's not part of our database here, so what we can do is, once again, we go to the SID, or sorry, to the fix page, and then we enter JFK VOR, and then we can insert radial 253. So 253 goes in here, and now we've got that point in as a reminder as well. What you can do if you really want to get fancy with your FMC is you click on here again, and now it's going to insert a place bearing distance waypoint in the scratch pad. We can go to the lags page and enter that up here. Now you can see that basically this point has just been created on the nav display. So remove the discontinuity, and now we can insert the 2,500 or above restriction that we have from our SID on this waypoint. And now we've got this in the FMC as well. Alright, gonna hit execute, and now this information is in our flight plan as well. So, now that we've dealt with the fix page, we inserted anything we deemed necessary, anything that we deemed useful. Normally, if you don't have to create anything fancy like we just did with this departure, then you can just use it to draw, for example, a 25-mile ring around your departure airport for MSA awareness or anything the likes. So in order to do this, we have a 3rd and a 4th fix page, so we would enter KJFK into here, and then we can do /25, and this is going to draw a 25-mile ring around our airport. Why 25 miles? Because the minimum safe altitude is always given in 25 miles around the station in question. So for example, here we can see it's based on JFK VOR instead of the airport, but they're located more or less at the same place. So most pilots just use the airport for that. And now if we zoom out on the nav display, then you can see that ring over here that tells us within this ring, 2,000 feet is going to be safe for us. Now that we're done with everything on the lateral part, we can start checking our horizontal part. And we do this, first of all, on the VNAV page, where we check the transition altitude. So we've got 80,000 or 18,000 in here, and if we compare that to the chart, we can see transition altitude 18,000. From there we can go on to the init reference page, where we've got our performance uplink. We can simply accept this, but we have to be aware that this only uplinks the reserves, cruising altitude and cost index. It does not uplink the zero fuel weight, and we'll talk about the reason for that later, and it does not uplink the minimum fuel temperature and the cruise CG. So what are we going to do? Well, some airlines just leave these things unchanged. Other airlines do make entries over there. So if we go onto the minimum fuel temperature, for example, then we can see -37 in here is the default number. That number is made up because the minimum fuel temperature is normally 3 degrees higher than the freezing temperature of the fuel. This number is used by the airplane to decide when to give you a warning about low fuel temperatures. There are two types of fuel commonly used on Boeing 777 aircraft. That is either Jet A fuel or Jet A1 fuel. Now, Jet A fuel is normally issued in the United States of America, and the freezing temperature of Jet A is -40 degrees centigrade. For that reason, -40 degrees plus 3 makes -37 degrees, and that is the default minimum fuel temperature. However, if you were departing from elsewhere than the US, then you would normally have Jet A1 fuel loaded, and Jet A1 freezes at -47 degrees centigrade. So if we were departing, for example, from the UK on a flight to the US, then our fuel would freeze at -47 degrees, and therefore we would insert a fuel temperature, or a minimum fuel temperature, of -44 degrees, so that the airplane alerts us in time before our fuel can actually start freezing. If you want it easy, just do what some 777 operators do and leave the -37 in there. The cruise CG normally remains unchanged, however some airlines just enter something like 30 in the cruise CG, which is used for performance calculation. The default 7.5 is very far forward and therefore leads to a conservative fuel prediction in the flight, while something that resembles the actual CG more closely, like 30, leads to a little bit more realistic fuel prediction. Next up, the step size can be changed by the pilots, but the standard RVSM normally works for the vast majority of flights. Now we have just one more thing to do, and that is we go to the thrust limit page and from there to the takeoff page. Then we click next page and verify that all our acceleration and thrust reduction altitude entries are correct. Default entries are 1000 for each on this livery, but depending on the livery, those entries may change. So in our case, we are going to fly noise abatement procedure number 2, which means acceleration and thrust reduction at 1000 feet, but other operators may be using different entries over here. And this concludes the FMC pre-flight procedure. When we are done with our FMC pre-flight, we can leave it on certain pages. So if we hit init reference, then it's going to bring up the performance init page, which we normally leave open on the captain's CDU. On the first officer's CDU, we're going to click route and next page and leave it open on the active route page number 2. And that is an indication to the other pilot that we have completed our FMC pre-flight procedure. Now, don't worry about our missing performance setup and that we did not enter any takeoff speeds yet. That is going to be done in the final CDU pre-flight procedure, which is only carried out after our load sheet is received. We will cover this in the respective tutorial together with the takeoff performance calculations, so skip forward to that if you want to complete the entire FMC pre-flight at this point. Finally, now that we're done with our universal flight tablet, we can just stow it on its holder over here again so that it's not in the way for the upcoming procedures. That's going to be it for this video. I do hope that you learned something over here. I will probably do a second, little bit shorter one that includes a little bit less details in the future, but for now this is the complete version, which I would like to thank you for very much. Thank you for watching. As always, if you liked the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And finally, a little reminder that if you want to read up on all this, I have written an ebook in which you can read up even more details than I have covered in this video. If you're interested, check the video description below. For now, thank you very much for watching. As always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And if you're up for more, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching and see you all again on the next one.